The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. Marion Blake sat hunched at the small wooden desk in her apartment, a single lamp casting a halo of light around her hands as she opened the envelope. Her name was written in old-fashioned ink, the kind you only ever saw in period dramas or calligraphy sets from a bygone time. There was no return address. The stamp had been smudged by the weather. Inside was a letter. 1 page. Neatly typed. To the next of blood. Your presence is required at the estate of Hollowmere House. You are named the sole inheritor. Instructions are enclosed. Come before the full moon wanes. Bring no one. There was no signature. Marion blinked. A trick? A joke? She had no family, at least, none she spoke of. Her father died when she was 12. Her mother vanished 2 years later. Raised in foster care, her only sense of home was this dimly lit apartment above a noisy Indian restaurant in New Jersey. Still, there was something about the letter. A smell. Old paper, yes, but something else, moss, maybe. Damp wood. And beneath that, the faintest trace of something metallic. Like rust. She turned the page over. Taped to the back was a key. It was iron. Real iron. Not the stuff they use now. It felt cold even in her warm palm, like it had never once felt the touch of sunlight. Alongside the key was a second note, this one handwritten. Use the north gate. Do not touch the doorbell. Do not speak your name aloud on the grounds. Above all, leave before the third night. Marion stared at the note for a long time. By morning, she was on a bus headed to Maine. The driver was a silent man with a lazy eye and an expression like wet stone. No one else rode with her. The rain followed the bus north, streaking the windows until the outside world blurred into trees, dark skies, and mile markers that stopped making sense. Eventually, even those disappeared. They dropped her at the end of an old gravel road, a cracked sign hanging on one hinge from a post, Hollowmere. The letters were carved deep, jagged as if done by hand. She walked. The forest closed in fast. Trees clawed overhead, and the air smelled green and heavy with decay. The north gate wasn't hard to find, black iron vines twisted into arches. The key slid in with a whisper, the click echoing through the trees as though someone were listening. Hollowmere House revealed itself slowly, like it didn't want to be seen all at once. First, the roof, steep, gabled, with a chimney that exhaled no smoke. Then windows. Dozens of them. None lit. All shuttered or cracked like blind eyes. The walls were stone, almost black, spotted with lichen and veins of creeping ivy that pulsed faintly in the dim light. No birds sang. No animals stirred. Even the wind seemed to stop at the property line. Marion approached the door. A bell pull dangled beside it, thick rope, frayed at the ends. She avoided it. Instead, she reached into her coat and retrieved the iron key once more. There was no visible keyhole. But as she held the key near the wood, something clicked. The door opened on its own. The air inside was colder than the forest. And from the shadows beyond the threshold, something whispered. Welcome home, Marion. Marion stood frozen in the doorway, the air brushing her face like the breath of something long asleep. She hadn't told anyone where she was going. No backup plan. No check-in call scheduled with a friend. She had simply obeyed the strange letter like a passenger on rails, as if some invisible hand had taken over the steering wheel of her life. Inside, Hollowmere House was quiet. Not the comforting quiet of an empty room, but the kind that pressed against your skin, whispering that you didn't belong. She stepped across the threshold. The door swung shut behind her. Not slammed, just a slow, final click. She turned instinctively, but there was no handle on the inside. Just solid oak with the faint impression of a handprint near the middle. Larger than hers. Too large. Marian steadied her breath. The entrance hall stretched before her in shadow and echo. An oil chandelier hung from the ceiling, its candles already lit, as if the house had been expecting her. Its flickering light spilled across checkered marble floors, where dust bloomed in patterns, footprints. Not hers. Something else had walked this hall recently. To her left was a long corridor lined with portraits. Massive things, too tall for a normal house. The air in this part of the estate felt thicker, saturated with something like mildew, or was it memory? She approached the first painting. A woman in a black Victorian gown stared out at her, eyes pale and watery, mouth pinched into a frown so severe it seemed etched into her skull. Her name was painted on a gold plate beneath the frame, Constance Holomere, 1831 to 1890. The next was a man, his face partially lost to smoke stains or mold, Edgar Holomere, 1829 to 1874. Then came a child. Then another. All with that same unmistakable hollowness in their eyes. None smiled. Every one of them looked like they were painted not as tributes but as warnings. As Marian moved, she noticed something unnerving. The eyes followed her. No trick of paint. Not the usual illusion. They moved. Just slightly. A twitch here. A flick there. When she stepped backward, they adjusted. When she tried to catch them in motion, they froze. Only when she stopped trying, pretended not to look, did the movement return in the corners of her vision. One painting stood out. Larger than the rest. A family of three, mother, father, daughter. The child's face was scratched out completely, clawed as though with fingernails. Marian leaned closer. That dress. The brooch. The curve of the woman's jaw. Her throat dried. The mother in the painting looked like her own mother. The woman who disappeared when Marian was 14. Same auburn hair. Same scar above her lip. No nameplate. She stared so long that the candlelight began to dance too fast, like the flames were reacting to her pulse. When she turned to leave the hallway, something cold brushed her shoulder. She spun. No one there. But the portrait with the scratched-out child now had 2 claw marks. Marian backed away quickly and returned to the main hall. A set of stairs wound upward like a spine, each step creaking not under her weight, but before she stepped, anticipating her path. She gripped the railing tightly. Dust bloomed around her fingers like smoke. At the top of the stairs was a door cracked open. She pushed it wider. It was a bedroom. A child's, by the look of it, faded wallpaper, once pastel, now yellowing and streaked with water damage. A wooden rocking horse stood in the corner. A dollhouse beside it. The window was shuttered shut with rusted nails from the inside. She moved to the bed. Tucked into the pillow was a music box. She turned the key. The lullaby that played was soft at first. Tinkling, sweet, almost hypnotic. Then the pitch warped. Sharpened. The tune shifted in subtle ways, becoming unfamiliar. Discordant. Marian shut the lid. It kept playing. From beneath the bed came the faint sound of humming. A child's voice. Then a whisper. She's not asleep. She's pretending. Marian staggered back, nearly knocking over the rocking horse. The music box fell silent. So did the humming. She forced herself to crouch and look under the bed. Nothing. Just dust and darkness. But as she stood, she saw it, scratched into the wooden floorboards near the headboard. For words, carved by a trembling hand. She sleeps in walls. Marion fled the child's bedroom, pulling the door shut behind her with trembling fingers. Her heart pounded in her ears, each beat echoing louder than the last, like someone knocking on a door deep inside her chest. She leaned against the wall of the corridor, cold seeping into her back from the ancient stone. She sleeps in walls. The phrase clung to her like cobwebs. Not lives, sleeps. That word felt more dangerous. It implied something waiting. Something that might wake up. Her breath fogged in the hallway. She hadn't noticed it before, but the temperature had dropped further. Her fingertips were going numb. Something about this house was wrong in ways she couldn't explain, not just eerie, but broken. Bent. Time didn't feel real here. Her watch had stopped the moment she passed the gate, its second hand twitching in place like a bug dying on its back. She decided to keep moving. Staying in one spot felt worse. Like letting something catch up. The second floor hallway stretched endlessly, the way old buildings sometimes did in dreams, always another door, always more silence. The light from the chandelier below didn't reach this high. Only a few wall sconces flickered here and there, casting pale, sputtering halos on the wallpaper, which was peeling in long, curling strips. But it did. The lanterns dimmed. The woman vanished. The child in the garden turned her head, turned it inside the painting, and looked directly at Marion. Marion stepped back. Now there was something new in the painting. Her. Standing in the library, painted in ghostly oil, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. In the hearth, a fire roared to life. The fire in the hearth burst to life as if it had always been burning, red, crackling, and impossibly hot. Marion staggered back, shielding her face from the sudden heat, but it didn't burn right. The flames were too steady. Too silent. The crackling didn't match the firelight. It sounded more like whispering. She looked again at the painting above the fireplace. Gone. The image was gone. Where once had been Hollowmere in its glory days, now there was only a smear of black and gray, as though someone had scraped the oil paint off with a razor. But she knew what she had seen. Knew the version of herself in the portrait had looked back. Acknowledged her. It wasn't just hallucination. The house was watching her. She turned toward the shelves, needing to anchor herself in something real. Something logical. Books. Thousands of them. Most were brittle and swollen with age, but a few looked pristine, untouched by time. She pulled one down at random, the Hollowmere lineage, blood and bone. No author. No publication date. Just a leather cover with gold embossing that shimmered even in the firelight. Inside were handwritten notes, some in ink, others in graphite. The book was a record, a journal of names, dates, births, deaths. Some entries were crossed out so violently that the ink had bled through multiple pages. Others were written in a second, shakier hand. She turned to a folded page marked with a torn ribbon. Her name. Marion Eleanor Blake. Birth date, correct. Mother, Diana Hollowmere. There it was. Not Blake. Not any of the Foster surnames. Her mother's real name. Below that, claimed, yes. Ritual, delayed. Observation, ongoing. Her heart stopped. What ritual? Who was observing? She flipped faster. Names she didn't recognize. Terms like thinning, blood veil, wall sleeper, and housecore repeated often. One passage, circled multiple times, read, "The sleeper stirs when the blood returns. The house does not forget." The child is the offering, but the heir is the key. If both return, the mouth will open. Mouth. Marian slammed the book shut. Behind her, the fire sputtered, then hissed. She turned in time to see the flames forming shapes, brief outlines of hands pressing out from inside the fire, like something trapped beneath the logs, writhing against a glass barrier. Fingers clawed at the grate, flickering into smoke before reforming again. A face emerged. Not a human face. Long, angular. Its eyes voids. No mouth, just a cracked, gaping hole where its jaw should be. It watched her, then slowly began to lean out of the fire, stretching forward on a neck that kept lengthening. Marian stumbled backward. Her legs hit a chair. She went down hard. The creature's head came closer, stretching halfway out of the hearth now. The room began to shake. Books tumbled from shelves. The chandelier above groaned and swayed. Then, just as suddenly, the fire snapped out. Smoke filled the library. The room fell silent. The only light now came from a narrow slit in the wall, the space between the double doors, which had somehow cracked open again. Marian crawled toward them, half coughing, half weeping. She spilled out into the corridor, dragging herself away from the library like she was escaping a war zone. She didn't stop moving until she found the staircase again. Halfway down the steps, she paused. The entrance hall below was different. It was dark now, no chandelier. No glow from sconces. Only moonlight leaking in through the cracks in the shutters. But that wasn't what stopped her. The floor was covered in footprints. Hundreds of them. All leading to the front door. All barefoot. All tiny. Like children. Marian gripped the banister so hard her knuckles went white. The moonlight shifted. From somewhere within the house, she heard the unmistakable sound of children laughing. Not joyous. Not playful. Mocking. She turned and fled back up the stairs. This time, she didn't stop until she reached the third floor. A floor that, she swore, hadn't been there before. The door at the end of the hall stood open. Inside was a room with no windows. Just one thing. A cradle. Rocking. Empty. The cradle rocked on its own. No wind. No vibration. Just that soft, deliberate motion, like a hand, invisible and patient, was pushing it back and forth in rhythm. It creaked gently, a sound that should have been harmless, but here it felt profane. Like lullabies in a graveyard. Marian stayed in the doorway, frozen. The walls of the room were lined with pale floral wallpaper, but time had leached all the color from it. Now it looked like skin, thin, cracked, and blistering in places. The cradle sat in the center of the room like an altar. She forced herself to step inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the door shut behind her. Softly. Just a click. No lock. No wind. No draft. She spun, grabbed the handle, nothing. The knob wouldn't turn. Her heart pounded harder now, and she turned to face the room again, breath short and shallow. That's when she heard it. Breathing. Not her own. Not from above or below. From inside the cradle. She stepped closer, one slow step at a time. Her fingers trembled as she reached out and took hold of the wooden rim. She leaned forward, just enough to peer inside. Nothing. No baby. No doll. Just an old, rotted quilt, threadbare and moth-eaten. Beneath it, something scratched. Slowly. Softly. Like nails across old wood. She peeled the quilt back. Still nothing. But the scratching continued. It was coming from under the cradle. Marian hesitated, then dropped to her knees and leaned low. A trapdoor, set into the floor beneath the cradle's frame, small and square, with iron hinges and a brass ring for a handle. The scratching stopped the instant she touched it. The house held its breath. Against all logic, against all instinct, she opened the trapdoor. Inside was a narrow shaft, lined with stone. A ladder descended into complete darkness. No light. No sound. The smell that rose from it was wrong, wet, moldy, but also sharp. Like iron. Like blood. She should have walked away. Should have. But her name was carved into the rim of the hatch. Marian Eleanor Blake. Not etched. Not written. Grown. As if the wood had always known her name and had simply waited to reveal it. She began to climb down. The rungs were slimy, cold. After a dozen steps, the last dim light from the cradle room vanished behind her, replaced by utter blackness. Still she climbed. Down. Down. Time no longer made sense. It could have been minutes. Hours. The air got heavier. Her breath shallower. The stone around her dripped with condensation, but there was no sound of water, just distant thuds. Heartbeats. Not hers. She hit the bottom. A corridor stretched ahead, more stone, more darkness, but now lined with niches in the walls. Each held a figure. Children. Lifelike statues, carved in horrifying detail. Every face unique. Some sleeping. Some screaming. Some smiling too wide. Their eyes, glass. No dust coated them. They had been placed here recently. She passed one. Then another. Then stopped. The third figure down wore a dress she recognized. A yellow sundress. Torn at the hem. It had been hers. From childhood. She reached for the statue's hand. It was warm. She recoiled. From the shadows at the far end of the tunnel, something moved. Slowly. Steadily. Dragging itself forward with scraping limbs and rasping breaths. Marian turned and ran, stumbling past the children, back to the ladder, scrambling upward without looking back. Whatever was behind her didn't follow. Not yet. She burst through the trapdoor, shoved the cradle aside, and slammed it shut. Her body trembled. Sweat dripped from her chin. Her breath came in broken gasps. The room had changed. Now there were two cradles. Both rocking. Both creaking. The door behind her opened on its own. The hallway beyond the cradle room was no longer the same. It should have led back toward the stairwell, toward something familiar. But now it curved. A soft bend to the right, like the spine of a sleeping beast. The wallpaper had changed too, darker now, red, patterned in what looked like twisting vines. But as Marian's eyes adjusted, she realized they weren't vines at all. They were veins. Faintly raised. Pulse thin. She didn't touch them. She followed the hallway. It led her to a landing. The stairs she descended weren't the same ones she'd used before. These were lined with candle niches. Each candle already lit. Each flame still. Motionless, even as she passed. She stepped into the dining room. It was massive. And wrong. A long wooden table stretched the length of the chamber, impossibly long, far too large for the house as it appeared on the outside. The ceiling above was vaulted, black as soot. Chandeliers dripped wax that never hit the ground. Around the table sat 13 chairs. Every one of them was occupied by mannequins. Old, lifeless, dressed in period clothing, crinolines, waistcoats, lace gloves. Their wooden hands were posed gently on the table. Their heads were turned toward her. Not all at once, but as she entered, one by one, their faces tilted just slightly to acknowledge her presence. In the chair at the head of the table sat a mannequin in a mourning veil. Its gloved hands cradled a teacup filled with what looked like black tar. The cup dripped slowly onto the tablecloth, but no one moved to clean it. No one breathed. Except her. Marion took a step closer. Silverware rested perfectly aligned before each guest. Plates were piled with food, but nothing real. The meat was waxy. The fruit was plastic. The bread was stone. A perfect replica of a feast. At the opposite end of the table, an empty chair waited. She didn't want to sit, but her knees buckled beneath her. She collapsed into it as though her body had been commanded. The seat was too hard, too cold, and far too familiar. It felt like a memory. Something from long ago. Something she'd forgotten. The mourning mannequin lifted its head. No movement. But Marion felt it. It looked into her. From across the room, a bell chimed. Not loudly. Just once. The mannequin to her left turned slightly and opened its mouth. A long, wet creak. And then it spoke. The house remembers, child. The mannequin opposite her opened its mouth next. You are not the first. But you are the last. More mouths opened. More voices, layered and echoing and wrong. Male and female. Adult and child. She is waking. She waits in walls. We were bones. You are blood. Marion stood, fast. The chair resisted for a moment, like hands gripping her shoulders, but then let go. The mannequin at the head of the table rose with her. It raised a single gloved finger and pointed behind Marion. She turned. At the far end of the room, a side door had opened. The space beyond it was pitch black. From within the darkness, a sound emerged. Dripping. Wet. Hungry. Marion ran. She sprinted across the room, past the mannequins, who turned to follow her with their blank, wooden eyes. As she reached the door, something brushed her ankle. A hand. Not wood. Flesh. She didn't look down. She hurled herself through the door and into the dark. The door slammed shut behind her. The darkness swallowed her. It was not the kind of dark that came from the absence of light, it was the kind that seemed to hate light. The kind that wrapped around your skin like wet burlap and whispered things directly into your brain. For a long moment, Marion couldn't tell if she was standing or falling. Her body felt weightless. Then suddenly heavy. Then both. When light returned, it wasn't from above. It came from the walls, a soft green glow, phosphorescent, leaking from long cracks in the stone around her like the veins of some buried creature. They pulsed slightly, as though breathing. She stood in a corridor. Different from before. This one had been carved, not built. The walls weren't brick or plaster, they were raw rock, shaped into unnaturally smooth curves. A tunnel, but living. She could feel it. A heartbeat. Deep. Low. Slow. It wasn't hers. She moved forward, not because she wanted to, but because her legs kept going. Every step echoed like a drumbeat. Her boots slapped wet stone. The floor was slick with some kind of moss that gave off a faint hiss as she walked over it. The corridor twisted, branched, turned in on itself, always guiding her downward. Eventually, it opened into a chamber. This room was circular, dome-like, and at the center of it stood a well. Not modern. Not even medieval. It was older than that. Its stones were uneven, stacked with strange symbols carved into their surfaces, runes that pulsed with the same green light. Around the well were candles. Dozens of them. And bones. Small bones. Child-sized. She approached the edge of the well. No rope. No bucket. No winch. Just a deep, yawning throat into blackness. When she leaned closer, she could hear voices. Not echoing up. Whispering outward. As if the well was dreaming. Or remembering. Mother left. Father burned. We stayed. We stayed. We stayed. Then silence. She stepped back. The walls of the chamber shifted slightly. She could feel it, like the house was adjusting its posture. A long crack split the stone floor behind her and something hissed out, steam, maybe. Or breath. From a shadowed alcove came movement. A figure emerged. It was human. Or had been. Now it was thin. Unnaturally so, as if whatever flesh once covered it had been sucked inward by grief or time. Its limbs were too long. Its hands dragged behind it, fingertips worn raw. Where its face should have been was a blur, like smoke, constantly swirling, refusing to settle into features. Marion stumbled backward. The thing raised one arm. Pointed to the well. It didn't speak. But her head filled with words. She waits. She dreams in stone. Feed her. Marion looked again into the well. A shape was rising. Slow. Dripping. Huge. Not climbing, not crawling. Floating. Its skin was translucent, pale like boiled meat. Its eyes were wide and wrong, set too far apart, milky and sightless. But it was awake. Waking. Whatever this was, it had once been buried. And her presence had stirred it. The whispers in her skull returned. Blood opens. Blood binds. You are both. She turned and ran. No exit. No door. The figure blocking the alcove now stood inside the room, but it no longer moved. It just watched her. And the thing in the well. It opened its mouth. Wider. Wider. Too wide. It didn't scream. It breathed in. And the candles went out. Darkness. Utter, crushing darkness. But not silence. Marion lay on the cold floor, breath shallow, chest tight. The breath of that thing, the vacuum from the well, had pulled every sound from the air, including her own voice. She tried to scream. Nothing came out. She wasn't sure how long she lay there. Minutes. Hours. Then, sound returned. Not gradually. Suddenly. A crack. A creak. A low groan, like with bending under pressure. She opened her eyes, though she hadn't realized they were closed, and found herself no longer in the stone chamber. She was lying on a hallway floor. Back inside the house. The well, the pale creature, the whispered voices, all gone. But not forgotten. She sat up slowly. This hallway was unfamiliar. The wallpaper here was peeling in large swaths, revealing wood underneath, not plaster. And not just any wood. Blackened. Burned in places. Some of it pulsing faintly beneath the charring, like a wound still trying to heal. A single door stood at the end of the hall. Bent on its hinges. Marked with soot and handprints. child-sized. She approached. The wood of the door was warm. She pushed it open. The room inside was massive, too massive to exist inside the house as she'd seen it. A ballroom. A ruined one. Chandelier pieces lay shattered on the floor. Mirrors lined the walls, each cracked or smeared. The piano in the corner had no keys. Only gaping holes and cobwebs. But someone was in here. Dancing. A figure. Spinning in slow, tired circles at the center of the room. A child. A girl. Wearing a tattered nightgown. Her hair matted. Her face hidden as she twirled, over and over. Humming to herself. Marion stepped into the room. The girl stopped. Still facing away. Then, a voice, soft and small. "You took too long." The girl turned. She had no face. Where features should have been, there was only smooth skin. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. But Marion could still feel her stare. "They tried to forget me," the girl said. Without a mouth. The words came directly into Marion's mind, cold and echoing. "They locked me in the walls. Said I made the house sick. But it was never me. It was her. She lives below. She sings when you sleep. And now she's hungry." The mirrors trembled. One cracked clean in half. In the shards, Marion didn't see herself. She saw her mother, Diana Holomir, bound to a chair, surrounded by flames, crying, reaching for someone. Then the image shattered. All the mirrors exploded outward, shards raining like glass rain. Marion ducked, covering her face. When she looked again, the girl was gone. In her place stood a door. Tall. Bone white. It had no knob. No hinges. No frame. Just a handle, iron and rusted, shaped like a hand. Carved into the wood above it. The forgotten wing. She didn't want to open it. But something behind her was approaching. A low skitter. Multiple limbs. Too fast. Too close. She reached for the iron handle and yanked. The door opened with a scream. Not the creak of hinges. A scream. Inside was dark water. An entire wing of the house submerged in black, oil-thick liquid that shimmered with impossible colors. Stairs led downward into the water's depths, and the ceiling above was covered in barnacles and strange seaweed. The house had drowned part of itself. A sacrifice, or a quarantine. Marion stepped into the water. It was warm. It rose past her ankles, then her knees. Every stair took her deeper. The door behind her slammed shut. The water whispered against her skin. And below, something swam. The water closed around her thighs with a sick, syrupy warmth. Not like bath water. Not like a lake. It was thicker. Too still. It clung to her skin like oil and pulsed with every heartbeat, as if the house had merged with something living beneath it, something wet and patient. She descended the stairs slowly, eyes scanning the murky depths. Walls extended out from the staircase in either direction. Doors lined them. Half submerged. Rotten. Some wide open, some barely hanging on. Streaks of something dark floated in the water, ash. Ink. Blood. No fish. No insects. Nothing alive. Except her. And whatever waited below. The stairs ended. Marion stood now waist-deep in the corridor of a sunken wing that had no right existing in a house built above ground. The air above the surface had grown humid, oppressive. Breathing felt like swallowing smoke. She waded toward the first door on her left. It was ajar. Inside was what had once been a child's bedroom, now warped, soaked, and mold-blackened. A rocking chair bobbed gently in the water, bumping against a decaying wall. The mobile above the crib still turned, even without wind, spinning slowly, endlessly, dangling paper cutouts of things no child should ever dream of, eyeless faces, skeletal animals, doors without frames. There was a voice behind her. Low. Humming. She turned, but no one was there. She pressed onward. The next door was sealed shut. A note floated beside it, barely legible but definitely addressed to someone. Don't open it again. She gets closer every time. The door creaked suddenly, just a little. A bubble of black water escaped from beneath it. She moved on. Farther down the corridor, a door stood wide open. Inside was a dining room, like the one she'd seen above. Only here, the mannequins sat at the bottom. Drowned. Still posed, but bloated, softened by water. Their wooden skin had begun to peel. Their hands rested on the table still, plates before them, except now the food was real, putrid, floating in fat and film. One of them turned its head slowly toward her. Another blinked. She ran. The water slowed her, clung to her calves. Something brushed against her foot. She screamed. It was a hand. Floating. Detached. But gripping something. She pulled it up, hesitating, breath short. In its fist, a photograph. Water-stained, bloated at the edges. But clear enough. A family portrait. Her mother. Her father. And a child. Her. They stood in front of Holomere House, smiles stiff but genuine. But behind them, in one of the windows, was a face. Grinning. Mouth open. Too many teeth. And no eyes. She dropped the photo and moved on, water now at her waist, then her chest. The corridor dipped here, forcing her to swim. She pushed forward through the oily black, coughing as water licked her chin. A pulse ran through the house. All the lights went out at once. Even the glow from behind her died. Now she floated in pure darkness. But she wasn't alone. From below her, something rose. She felt the cold first, an unnatural cold that punched through the warmth of the water like a spear. Then, fingers. Wrapping around her ankle. Thin. Wet. Strong. She kicked, screamed, clawed at the water, trying to surface, but the thing pulled her down. Not fast. Not violently. Just, relentlessly. She opened her eyes underwater. Shapes drifted in the dark. Children. Dozens. Hundreds. Floating. Watching her. Their mouths open in eternal screams, their arms limp, their eyes gone. She thrashed harder, finally breaking the surface with a gasp. Her hands hit stone. A stair. She clawed her way out of the water and onto the floor of a new hall. Behind her, the corridor flooded with a new sound. Laughter. Childlike. Giddy. Echoing off the wet stone like knives wrapped in silk. The corridor ahead was dry. Stone again. Marion stood, soaked, shivering, her skin smelling like rot and river mud. A door waited at the end of the hall. Carved into it in deep, deliberate letters. Room of Roots. And beneath it, freshly scrawled. She's almost here. Marion stood before the door, dripping and pale, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the handle. Room of Roots. The words felt alive in her mouth, though she didn't dare speak them aloud. Saying things in Holomere seemed to wake them up. She turned the handle slowly. The door didn't open. It sank inward, like it had no hinges, like the wall itself was breathing and the wood was part of its skin. It folded open with a sound like snapping branches and soft weeping. She stepped through and entered a forest. Not a room. A forest. Inside the house. Dark trees stretched upward beyond sight, their trunks too close together, their bark gray like old bones. The ground was soft, not with moss or dirt, but with hair, long strands of black and brown and gold, tangled and matted into a floor. And from every tree, roots spilled down from the branches like veins, tangling together in impossible weaves. Some pulsed. Some bled. She tried to trace a path between them. The roots shifted under her feet, squirming at times, like worms crawling just beneath the scalp of the earth. The air here was different. Not damp or cold or foul. Sweet. Like honey. But wrong. Sweet like spoiled fruit. Like rot masked with perfume. And in the stillness, the forest spoke. Not in words. In breath. In pulses of light through the roots. In the fluttering of unseen wings. In memory. Suddenly, the forest was filled with voices. Not whispers, laughter. Children's laughter. Playful. Giddy. Then manic. Then cruel. The trees moved slightly as she passed. Their bark rippled. From one of the trunks, a face began to form, stretched, as if someone had been swallowed whole and pressed outward from inside the wood. A child's face. Mouth open. Hollow. She backed away, into another root, which wrapped around her ankle and tugged. She fell hard. Hands broke through the forest floor, small, muddy, dead hands, grabbing at her sleeves, her boots, her wrists. She kicked, fought, screamed. Then, all the hands stopped. At once. The roots retracted, releasing her. The forest grew quiet again. A light appeared ahead, dim, flickering. She ran toward it. Branches clawed at her. Whispers tried to pull her attention. One voice even called out, perfectly mimicking her mother's tone. "Marion, come back here right now." She didn't look back. The trees opened into a clearing. And in the center of the clearing was a well. Another one. But this time, it was upside down. Its stone mouth pointed downward, suspended above the ground by chains that stretched into the canopy. From it dripped thick black liquid, steaming as it hit the floor. Marion approached cautiously. Carved into the stones around the clearing were the names of children. Hundreds. No dates. No explanations. Only first names. Some familiar. Some impossibly old. Some scratched over again and again, as though someone kept trying to forget them, and failing. There was one stone with her name. Marion. Freshly carved. Still wet with sap or blood. And beneath it, root bearer. Mouth opener. Key of Holomere. A tremor passed through the clearing. From above, a figure descended. Not lowered. Dropped. But landed without a sound. It had no face. Just smooth skin. But in its chest was a gaping hole, and inside that hole was a mirror. In the mirror, she saw herself. But not now. A child. Alone in a foster home. Crying. Holding a cracked music box. Then another image. Her mother, standing before Holomere House, speaking to someone hidden from view. "I'll give you what you want. Just leave her alone." Another, a contract. Signed in blood. Stamped with an emblem of an eye, split by roots. Marion stared at the mirror until it shattered. The faceless thing opened its chest cavity wider, and hands spilled out. Grasping. Hungry. She ran again, through the roots, through the hair-thick floor, back toward the forest door. Behind her, the figure gave chase, but not running. Gliding. Trees bent out of its way. Branches snapped. Roots bled. The door appeared in front of her. She flung it open, and found herself back in the entrance hall. Only now, the ceiling was gone, and the house above her spiraled upward forever. The house had grown. Marion stood in the entrance hall, once grand, now monstrous. Where the second-floor balcony and chandelier had once loomed, there was now an infinite shaft spiraling upward, its walls layered with windows, staircases, and balconies stacked on top of one another like vertebrae in some impossible skeleton. There were no floors anymore. Only the spiral. And every level was shifting. Rooms rotated slowly, doors moving in and out of sight, staircases curling, unraveling, tightening again. It was alive, this place. And now, it was waking up fully. Marion took a step backward, dizzy from the vertigo above her. From the depths of the spiral, bells began to chime. Faint at first. Then louder. One for every floor. Dozens. Hundreds. Thousands. She covered her ears, but the sound pushed into her skull. Not sound anymore, but memory. Each bell carried a voice, a moment from the past. "Don't leave me here. I didn't want this." She promised it wouldn't hurt. "Marion, please, wake up." The final bell was the loudest. Not a ring. A scream. Somewhere above her, a door opened. And something stepped out onto the spiral. She didn't see it clearly, only its shape. But she felt it. Wrong. Long arms. Crooked back. Its head was sideways, like its neck had never been set right. It began to climb downward, in jerking, spasmodic lurches. It was coming for her. She ran for the closest staircase. Each step twisted under her feet, changing angles, trying to throw her off. The stairs breathed. Exhaled dust. One blink too long and the steps ahead would rearrange, trying to trap her. Or feed her upward. Or down. The spiral kept stretching. Now she could see rooms within the walls. Rooms without floors. Floating. Turning. Inside them, moments replayed. A child being punished. A woman burying a box beneath a floorboard. A boy drawing on a wall while crying blood. Her mother, kneeling, surrounded by roots, whispering, "I'm sorry," to something unseen. Marion reached a landing. A door with no frame stood open. She stepped through, and was back in her childhood bedroom. Perfectly replicated. The pale pink walls. The chipped bookshelf. The stuffed bear with one eye. Her music box on the dresser. Outside the window, Hollowmere House. Not ruined. Brand new. She turned. Her mother stood in the doorway. Wearing the blue cardigan she wore the last night Marion ever saw her. Tears streaked her cheeks. "You shouldn't have come back," Diana said. Her voice was real. Soft. Terrified. Marion stepped forward. "Why did you leave me?" Diana looked away. "Because she made me." The house. I didn't know what she was, only that I owed her. I broke the oath. I left the line. And Holomir doesn't forget. It calls us back. One by one. The walls began to ripple. Diana clutched Marion's arms. You have to go. She's nearly whole. If she takes you, she won't sleep again. Not ever. This house will spread. Through towns. Cities. People. The room shook. From the closet, something pounded. Once. Then again. And again. Harder. The door bulged inward. Marion backed away. Diana shoved her toward the window. Jump. What? Jump. The closet door burst open. A figure crawled out. Tall, feminine, limbs too long, teeth like needles, eyes like bottomless pits. It looked like Diana. But older. Ruined. And it was laughing. Marion turned and threw herself through the glass. The glass shattered around her as Marion plummeted, except there was no impact. No thud. No pain. She landed not on the stone path outside her childhood window, but in soil. Warm. Soft. Alive. She pushed herself up from a bed of roots and vines, blinking against a pale green glow. The garden stretched around her, not the garden from the photo, neat and blooming, but something else. This garden was wrong. The sky overhead was neither night nor day. Just a thick, sickly fog, pulsing with light like a heartbeat. Trees bent in crooked shapes, their leaves whispering even when there was no wind. Flowers grew in slow, twitching spirals, opening and closing like mouths. And all around her were scarecrows. Dozens. Some hung from posts. Some stood. Some knelt. Each one wore a different set of clothes. None hers. All of them had heads made from sacks, but their faces were not stitched. They were pressed outward from inside. Familiar outlines of screaming mouths. Twisting fingers. Some moved when she looked away. She turned toward the house. It loomed in the distance, far too tall now, so tall it vanished into the fog. But the windows flickered like eyes. The front door opened by itself. The house was inviting her back. But between her and the front path stood a statue. Or, what she thought was a statue. It was a woman. But made of roots. They grew out of the earth, sculpting her form, weaving into skin and bone. Her face was serene, her eyes closed. Vines wrapped her torso, her arms, her hair. At her feet, a plaque, chiseled in black stone. Diana Holomir. Last of the line. Gave herself to bind the sleeper. Blood sealed. Roots fed. Marion fell to her knees. Her mother had become part of it. Not killed. Given. Not even the house could hold the sleeper alone. It needed blood. Memory. Sacrifice. And now it wanted Marion to finish the ritual. From the forest behind the statue came a rustling. The trees parted. The sleeper stepped into the garden. Now, for the first time, Marion saw it clearly. It wore a woman's shape, twisted, bone-thin, arms too long, jaw dislocated and swinging. Hair like kelp. Eyes like twin holes in reality. Her skin was bark. Her breath was rot. But her face was hers. Marion's. A mockery. A reflection. A future. The sleeper smiled, her lips cracking open like an old wound. I was you before you were born. I will be you again when you are gone. Roots slithered out from her feet, dragging across the soil, hungry. Lie down. Rest. Feed me your name. Marian stood. She turned to her mother's statue. Tears spilled freely now. I'm sorry. She reached up, tore the roots from the statue's chest. The forest screamed. The sleeper recoiled. The statue crumbled. From beneath the broken vines, a heartbeat pulsed into the ground. A shockwave that pushed the fog upward. The soil cracked. Light spilled through it. A door opened below her. In the earth, a door of mirrors. It glowed with silver and memory. Without thinking, without knowing why, Marian jumped in. Falling. Marian had fallen before, through trapdoors, downstairs, into wells, but this time was different. She wasn't falling through space. She was falling through herself. Mirrors flashed around her, infinite reflections spinning in every direction. Young Marian, teenage Marian, grieving Marian, dreaming Marian. Each one watching. Each one trapped behind glass. Then came the others. Faces she didn't recognize. Children. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Some sobbing. Some screaming. Some smiling. Each one reflected across the endless tunnel, trapped forever in some twisted echo of their lives, sealed in the house's memory like insects in amber. She landed softly, without sound. No splash. No crunch. Just stillness. She stood now in a long corridor of mirrors. Every wall. Every ceiling tile. Every inch of floor, silvered and flickering. Her own reflection stared at her from every direction. Except one. One mirror was empty. No reflection. Just a pulsing void. She stepped toward it. As she approached, the surface rippled. Then formed a shape. Her mother. Diana stood inside the mirror, older, sadder than the last time Marian had seen her. She raised her hand and placed it against the glass. Marian matched it. You don't have to stay here, Diana whispered. But the house will try to make you believe you do. Marian felt warmth through the glass. You gave yourself to protect me, Marian said. Her mother nodded. And I'd do it again. But it wasn't enough. Not forever. You're the last of the blood. The seal is breaking. Behind her, the mirrors began to change. They no longer reflected her. They reflected Holomir. All of it. All timelines. All realities. And now it wanted Marian to finish the ritual. From the forest behind the statue came a rustling. The trees parted. The sleeper stepped into the garden. Now, for the first time, Marian saw it clearly. It wore a woman's shape, twisted, bone-thin, arms too long, jaw dislocated and swinging. Hair like kelp. Eyes like twin holes in reality. Her skin was bark. Her breath was rot. But her face was hers. Marian's. A mockery. A reflection. A future. The sleeper smiled, her lips cracking open like an old wound. I was you before you were born. I will be you again when you are gone. Roots slithered out from her feet, dragging across the soil, hungry. Lie down. Rest. Feed me your name. Marian stood. She turned to her mother's statue. Tears spilled freely now. I'm sorry. She reached up, tore the roots from the statue's chest. The forest screamed. The sleeper recoiled. The statue crumbled. From beneath the broken vines, a heartbeat pulsed into the ground. A shockwave that pushed the fog upward. The soil cracked. Light spilled through it. A door opened below her. In the earth. A door of mirrors. It glowed with silver and memory. Without thinking, without knowing why, Marion jumped in. Falling. Marion had fallen before, through trapdoors, downstairs, into wells, but this time was different. She wasn't falling through space. She was falling through herself. Mirrors flashed around her, infinite reflections spinning in every direction. Young Marion, teenage Marion, grieving Marion, dreaming Marion. Each one watching. Each one trapped behind glass. Then came the others. Faces she didn't recognize. Children. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Some sobbing. Some screaming. Some smiling. Each one reflected across the endless tunnel, trapped forever in some twisted echo of their lives, sealed in the house's memory like insects in amber. She landed softly, without sound. No splash. No crunch. Just stillness. She stood now in a long corridor of mirrors. Every wall. Every ceiling tile. Every inch of floor, silvered and flickering. Her own reflection stared at her from every direction. Except one. One mirror was empty. No reflection. Just a pulsing void. She stepped toward it. As she approached, the surface rippled. Then formed a shape. Her mother. Diana stood inside the mirror, older, sadder than the last time Marion had seen her. She raised her hand and placed it against the glass. Marion matched it. "You don't have to stay here," Diana whispered. "But the house will try to make you believe you do." Marion felt warmth through the glass. "You gave yourself to protect me," Marion said. Her mother nodded. "And I'd do it again." But it wasn't enough. Not forever. You're the last of the blood. The seal is breaking. Behind her, the mirrors began to change. They no longer reflected her. They reflected Holomir. All of it. All timelines. All realities. The house in 1801, brilliant and new. The house in 1922, decaying and desperate. The house in 1975, burning. The house in 1996, empty. The house in 2008, rebuilt. The house now, alive. Each version of the house swirled around her, colliding, fracturing, merging. And in all of them, the sleeper waited. Her form was different in every mirror. A girl. A mother. A tree. A void. A reflection. A mouth. Always watching. Always waiting. The final mirror shattered without sound. And Marion stood in a circle of herself. 12 versions. All her. One holding a knife. One bound in chains. One curled on the floor, catatonic. One already dead. Each stared at her with wide, knowing eyes. The version with the knife stepped forward. "It's always been you," she said. "You end it. Or she begins." She handed Marion the knife. And faded. The others followed. One by one. Until only she remained. And behind her, rising through the shattered mirrors like a wave of bones, came the house. It rebuilt itself with every second. Wood groaned into place. Nails screamed as they drove themselves into beams. Rooms unfolded from ceilings, doorways sprouted from walls, staircases uncoiled like tongues. And at the center, the sleeper, now fully formed. A woman. A goddess. A house. She reached for Marion, fingers made of door frames and glass teeth. Come. Lay down. Let me wear you. Marion raised the knife. You don't get to be me. She cut her palm. Blood struck the mirrored floor. It sang. The house shrieked. Every version of Holomere collapsed inward. Fire, rot, storm, age, memory, folding in on itself like paper in a furnace. The mirrors cracked. Marion screamed as light poured out of her wound and into the reflection. And then, nothing. Just light. Marion awoke in a chair. Not on the floor. Not in a pit. A chair. Upright. Wooden. Familiar. She blinked slowly. Her hand, where she had cut it, was bandaged. The bleeding had stopped. The pain hadn't. Around her, the room was ordinary. Wooden floor. Fireplace. Bookcase. It looked like a parlor. Bright, but not harsh. Daylight through tall windows. Birds outside. A clock ticking gently on the mantel. A kettle whistling somewhere behind a closed door. But nothing moved. It was all still. Frozen. Her eyes adjusted. The windows showed no outside. Just white. Not fog. Nothing. She stood, slowly. Her limbs were stiff, like she hadn't moved in years. Or centuries. She looked around. A mirror above the fireplace. She approached it warily, but her reflection stared back, normal. Human. Pale, yes. Hollow-eyed, yes. But hers. She placed a hand to her chest. Her heart beat once. And then, the door behind her creaked open. She turned. A woman stood there. Dressed in gray. Hair braided. Face veiled. No features showed. But Marion knew her name. The house. Not the sleeper. Not the goddess. Just the thing that had grown around all the pain. The woman stepped forward slowly and sat in the chair Marion had just left. She spoke in a voice that echoed from beneath the floorboards. You cut the root. You broke the cycle. You unbuilt me. Good, Marion said hoarsely. The house tilted its head. Was it? You'll never know what I might have become. You became too much already. The house folded its hands. And now you have a choice. The one no one else was strong enough to take. Another door appeared. Right behind Marion. Small. Unremarkable. Painted red. That is the after door, said the house. Walk through it and you leave me. Forever. Not even memory will follow. Marion blinked. What's the other choice? The house smiled beneath its veil. And pointed down. The floor beside the chair peeled open slowly like a scab. Beneath it, roots. Endless. Hungry. The soil shifted with breath. Stay. Rule me. Shape me. You know my halls now. My rooms. My moods. You could quiet me. Guide me. Make me less cruel. Marion felt the blood in her veins cool. Or more cruel, she said. Yes, whispered the house. Silence stretched. Marion turned to the after door. It had no handle. No hinges. Just a surface that pulsed slightly with her heartbeat. She reached for it. Paused. Looked back. Why do you whisper? She asked the house. The house replied. Because shouting would break you. Marion placed her hand on the after door. A sound like wind filled her ears. Or breath. Or memory being erased. She turned the knob that wasn't there. Opened the door. Stepped through.